And I'm excited because this is our 10th Barichara update, but we actually missed 2 of them because I had one of them was an annoying visa process thing, and the other one was the amazing visit of Willem Ferreira. I was busy on a Thursday. But that means that today marks 3 months that we've been doing the Barichara updates. And if you were to go back and watch all of them, which is like 15 to 20 hours of videos, it's sort of insane how much has happened in the last 3 months. And what I try to do is not overwhelm people too much with what happens every single week. And we still all kind of get overwhelmed because there's so much happening. And so today, what I want to do is really, in a way, it's like I want to start giving us the glimpse of, like if you imagine that you're in the North Atlantic Ocean and it's at night and the water is dark and the air and the sky is dark and there's some big thing moving, and it might surface and turn out to be like a whale, but you don't know what it is yet. All you can do is you can start to see the shape of the movement of the water, and you can't quite see the shape of the body of the thing that's emerging. That I feel like we're in a place like that right now. Lilian and I were talking the other day where together we were starting to sense some of the shape of it, of this incredible capacity to build a different kind of financial and governance system distributed across bioregions around the world. And that there are a lot of things happening. It's sort of like you squint your eyes and try and see the shape of it, and you're only seeing little bits of it because it's so big and so diverse. But all of us who are paying attention, we can feel it. We can feel it coming. And for reasons that I think Antonio, who isn't here, and I don't know if he can join us today, but Antonio was sensing at the beginning of the year when he suggested that we have a ReFi event sandwiched between Cosmoverse and DevCon, that it would actually help to pull together a kind of coherence that's really needed. And I would say that his intuition has been right. And it's not because of our event. It's not like our event's doing it. It's that the field is doing it. And our event is a focal point to start to see some of the shape of it. And so what I want to share with you is some of what's been happening in the last week. Of course, highly biased by what I see, meaning that I'm glad that Lilian and Jacob and Kathy and Tyler and Penny over there, who are all here in Barichara, who could share other stories of what's happening here. I want to sort of continue holding what's happening in Barichara and how it relates to the larger world as the lens that I will hold, so that we can start glimpsing that movement of the shape of this emerging body from the deep ocean, this thing that's so big we can't quite see what it is yet. And so with that said, I've got some slides, but I'm going to try and keep the slides brief, because last week when we didn't have internet and I couldn't prepare the slides, it turned out it was really good just to have the open conversation. And so I want to make plenty of time for that today. But first I want to show some slides because I think it really helps to look at pretty pictures and to have a couple of schematic diagrams, just a couple, and then go into our conversation. But before I do that, I want to name that there are 2 other sides of this that I won't talk much about, but that some of you are sensing. One is that within Earth regenerators, there's a lot of change happening. With bioregional catalysts, which Benji could speak to as a good representative of, with what's happening around creating a governance council, a different model of learning journeys. There's just a lot of stuff happening in Earth regenerators itself that I will barely talk about today. And there's a lot of stuff that I think Sev could fill into, that Paula could fill into. If Antonio was here, he would fill into in this like ReFi, regenerative finance, whatever that thing is, space. There's so much happening. And so again, I'm not going to talk much about those spaces, and I don't even know much about those spaces because I'm holding so much complexity with my own piece. But I'm just really trusting those spaces to do their thing. And so with that said, I want to show you a couple of slides and give us context. So let's do that. So first, I think the main theme for my slides today will be pretty pictures. So the first pretty picture is a picture I took last Friday. And I was taking this as we're walking down from the Bio Parque, and here in the foreground where there's clear ground, the campesino man who had really tall corn there, and he had just cleared the corn. So all of a sudden you could see this view. And I just thought it was nice to have this view that we're in a really magical place here in Barichara. Some of you will remember I've said this many times. Barichara is the Guane word for the place of rest. And the Guane people did not have a settlement here. They didn't have a town. They came here for ceremony. This was a spiritual place. And you can sense that with what happened this morning. Penny and I were walking to the Bioparque, and after a night of rain and with all of the mist and fog, this is what the first sunlight looked like when it touched the town. See, the sunlight touching the town this morning made the town glow. And the main thing that's glowing there is the central church. But what I want you to notice is that there's a little bit of some trickery going on, because I don't see that church as Catholic. I see that church as stone made from the clay of this territory. And that's why the local people are called Pati Amarillo, which means yellow foot, because you can see the yellow orangish color of the dirt in those stones in that church. And when you see the sun shining on the earth in the form of a church, it glows like gold. Now, this is important because I'm about to show you two other kinds of local gold. This is important because the indigenous people of the northern Andes, and actually the central Andes, including the Incas all the way down in Peru and everywhere in between, had a very special relationship to gold, because gold was a metal. They have like 7,000 years of metallurgical history with some of the best metal workers on earth during that period of time, creating amazingly intricate jewelry and trinkets for their ceremonies and rituals. And the key idea is that gold is a metal that can hold the spiritual energy of the sun, which is the creator god for at least 200 indigenous cultures of this continent. And so gold is the expression of the universe bringing life to Pachamama, to the Mother Earth. So when you see the gold reflected in this church, that's why I said it's not a Catholic symbol, it's an indigenous symbol, because you're seeing gold reflected in the dirt. And I want to show you two other kinds of gold that I saw this morning. This morning, I saw a native bee gathering pollen on a little flower in the food forest, and noticed the gold color of the bee. You can imagine the gold color of the honey that you would eat from this bee, or the gold orangish color of the pollen that would be in the hive of this bee. And you can even see its back leg is kind of yellow as it's gathering the pollen. So one of the most powerful forms of gold here is the pollinator insects that create the most delicious and nutritious sugar on earth, honey, in our food forest. And here on the right is a tarantula wasp. This is the kind of wasp that hunts grasshoppers and small spiders. It has one of the most painful stings of any insect on earth, but luckily they're really passive. This was one of 3 tarantula wasps that were sleeping in this gualandai tree with dew on its wings. So this wasp slept during the night and collected water on the tiny hairs on its wings, and you can see their golden color. It kind of looks like what's the name of that mineral that when sap becomes a fossil? Can anyone remind me the name of that? It's what, like amber. Amber, thank you. Notice how the wasp's wings look like amber, and amber is a thing that holds, like when they found DNA from a dinosaur, it was a dinosaur egg in amber. And so amber is a very, very special alchemical elixir for returning ourselves to deep history. And here it is on the body of a wasp. And I wanted you to see this because I think that this secret language of gold that's expressed in these 3 forms is part of what we're looking for. We're looking for the secret language of life for what's happening in Barichara. And then there's this. This is the wisdom of evolution, because this is a blade of native grass. You know, I talk a lot about pulling the invasive grass, the brachiaria. I don't talk much about the native grasses. Well, after the rains last night, while the fog came through, look at all of the tiny hairs on the native grass and look at how much water it holds. And so if we can reforest this land and bring back the fog, even during the dry season when it doesn't rain, in the morning, this is what the leaves of the grass will look like. This is the water for the hummingbirds, for the lizards, for the frogs, for the snakes, for those pollinating insects, they all get their water from the grass. And so I want you to see the secret language of this territory expressed through the evolution of hairs on the back leg of the bee, on the wing of the wasp, and on the leaf of the grass. These secret little tendrils distributed across the structures, decentralized with an intelligence to collaborate, interacting in their environments. This is the secret language of what we're doing in Barichara. And so I wanted you to see that. And then I wanted you to see this because I took a picture this morning of the food forest, and I just can't believe that a year ago this was invasive grass. And those pictures I took of the bee and the wasp were sitting on flowers and sitting on branches in this space. Well, Penny was pulling grass and doing a morning meditation. I was walking around taking pictures and feeling the incredible fecundity and abundance of life that's already arrived here in 1 year of regeneration. And so I just wanted you to see it and revel in it with me for a moment. And this is the centropic agroforestry system in the bioparque that's 4 months old. And I just want you to see that in 4 months, it is flourishing, growing like crazy with the food forest in the background there. That's the one I was doing the work on before. So I want you to see the growth and the abundance of what's happening. For us to remember that this is the real context of our work, is places like this and relationships like these. And then here is a cactus I found lying on the ground. I planted beside the road, and there's a little native bee coming to land on some of the fledgling leaves that are growing on the tip of it. That you can just see that the cactus does a lot more than hold water. Cacti are famous for their beautiful flowers. All desert people know this. And so we just have this. It's all around us, these little interactions. And you know how closely I had to look to see that tiny bee? If we don't stop and smell the roses, we're not going to see the pollinating bees. And so there's something about going deep into these details and having a spiritual relationship, a relationship of connecting ourselves to what's happening in the moment and feeling all of this life is how we're going to do all of our regenerative work. I made this graphic to try to summarize what's happened in the last week. Because as we know, we are targeting ourselves toward the North Star of creating a living prototype of a regenerative bioregion. And there's so much going on that I just can't tell you about all of it. So what I want to tell you about is a couple of things. And instead of creating different slides for each one and having most of our conversation today be a slideshow, I wanted to do this all in one graphic. One thing is that a generous gift came in the last week that has transformed our relationship to Las Albercas. The generous gift came in the form that we had a 6-month purchase agreement to complete the purchase of Las Albercas, which is the land for the Barichara Ecoversity, and it would expire on September 5th. But for a lot of reasons that many of you know, the money hasn't come in yet, and it's actually going to be available at the end of September, which means we would lose our down payment and lose the land unless we had a way to extend the agreement. And the owners of the land kept asking us for another $25,000 payment, and we just didn't have it. And in our pledge call for the pledge community of the Ecoversity last week, I asked everyone in the pledge community, could they help us find $25,000? Might we use the money we've already raised from the pledge community for this? And it created a lot of tension and confusion, a really beautiful generative space of unclarity about what is the real purpose of the pledge money? Should we be doing this with the money? Should we not? What should we do? And we came out of that call, those of you who were on it, sort of confused about where to go next. But that confusion caused people to keep thinking and feeling into it. And then an anonymous member of the pledge community came to me later and said, I'm in a unique position right now where I happen to have cash flow of $25,000 until the beginning of November, and I have to have it back by then, but I can loan it to you for you to make this payment. That was on Saturday. On Monday, the payment was made. On Tuesday, it arrived in my bank account in the US. On Wednesday, yesterday, we sent the money to the owners of Las Albercas and signed an agreement to extend the 2-month time period. And I found a backup person on Twitter who said that they could back the $25,000 and extend the loan if for some reason we don't have the sale of the house go through on time, which means the person who donated this $25,000 for a window of 2 months is now backed and secured by a stranger on Twitter. So the generous gift is that the universe is conspiring for our success. That's the generous gift, is that somehow we went from really deep confusion, and many of you know I have held the stress and the fear and the uncertainty about Las Albercas for 2 years, and the last few months have been really hard on me, and it was just like, whew, all free, all open again. Also, with the Territorial Foundation, we are moving forward really well. Yesterday, we had a call with the lawyers from the national organization Territoria to finalize the 14-page legal agreement they created for fiscal sponsorship, so that the money we're raising, which is going to Possible Planet, thanks to Jonathan and Victoria for their help, the money from the pledge community is going to their nonprofit, and then will be forwarded to Territoria when we're ready to move it into the local territory. Territoria, which is a national foundation, will bring the money into Barichara until our local foundation is set up and ready to receive money directly. And so all of that continues moving forward. Also in the last week, we structured the Barichara Landscape Fund with the first prototype of a slide deck for fundraising. A friend of mine named Edward Perello, who has been lurking in the sidelines for the last 7 or 8 months, saw that I was ready to talk about helping me evolve and do multiple rounds of improvement on the slide deck to make it available for raising hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, because he understands the value of what we're doing. So we're starting to get real support around trying to raise $500,000 in the next couple of months, which of course is profoundly connected to the ReFi event that we're doing. And also we're creating real liquidity pools. And for those of you in the crypto space, you know I'm making a joke, because crypto liquidity pools are actually a technical piece of infrastructure in the crypto space. One of the liquidity pools was the pledge community finding that $25,000 and someone on Twitter backing it. There was a liquidity of trust aligned around purpose. And there are liquidity pools around the Centropic agroforestry work as it's continuing. There are liquidity pools of trust around the Territorial Foundation and the ways we're collaborating. There are liquidity pools around the way we're creating teams to start creating maps of value flow, to start designing community currencies, to start doing things related to the event as we're building up to it. And then, of course, Antonio is offering a beginner's guide to ReFi that starts next Wednesday that we announced on Earth Regenerators and people are signing up to. And again, speaking of liquidity pools, all the money raised for that is donated to the ER fund. And so that we're actively feeding each other forward in the gift economy, as we've always done. And all of this work is just, in the last week, every bit of it has moved forward. Every bit of it has become more coherent. Every single day, almost every hour, we have new collaborators appearing out of the woodwork. This morning, I connected with someone on Twitter and brought them into the flow. And we're starting to organize across different groups of people to design the governance and finance tools for this landscapes level work. All the while, Benji is hosting a series of beautiful calls around the common land model for landscape investment with bioregional catalysts to prepare us to take what we're prototyping and take it directly to other bioregions. And so all of this is happening. And it's just like mind-boggling. And oh yeah, I finally got the paperwork I needed after 6 months to submit my visa application in the right way. And while I haven't received it yet, I actually believe I'll get it this time. And so on Tuesday, I submitted my visa application with the proper paperwork. I had to submit it 4 previous times without the proper paperwork just to keep the process going, paying money each time and having to deal with headaches. And so all of that is moving forward as well. So I just want to name this like ridiculously complex space with all these things happening, and they're all progressing moment by moment, hour by hour, day by day. And they're all pointed toward the first regenerative bioregional project, named as a regenerative bioregional project, articulated as a point of collaboration to replicate into other territories around the world. And so all of this is happening. All of you are a part of it. And so, I got this to wake up. The key thing that I want to mention right now is that people are starting to enroll for the 100 tickets we have for the ReFi Barichara event. I want to let all of you know that we're going to invite local people in Barichara to attend without needing a ticket. So those 100 tickets do not include the people of Barichara, and the people of Barichara do not have to pay. Whatever surplus money we make from the event is going to go into the Territorial Foundation and support projects on the ground. And we are getting ever clearer day by day about this bioregional investment platform and how it works. initially focused on supporting a core team and a couple of key regenerative projects like the Center for Syntropic Agroforestry and transforming the local food system, and supporting specific anchor projects that are doing watershed restoration and reforestation work, while we continue building these capacities and telling the stories better with each passing day. And so all of this is just coming into coherence with these two major points of focus: gathering people at an event and all of the ways that that's weaving us together. Sev is here on this call today because he got pulled into the planning of that event. So this weaving is happening. And what that says is, Sev, you being on the call right now shows us that the ReFi event is not October 3rd through 7th. It's already happening right now and it's distributed. It's just going to have a moment of focus for 5 days, physically present in Barichara, and then we'll continue in decentralized fashion afterwards. And so that's to name that we are creating a mental model of an event to anchor us in a flow that's actually a weaving process that's so much bigger, no event could possibly hold it. And we're actually weaving across a global network of events called ReFi Spring, which are enabling us to coordinate between all of these projects around the world by having individual people sharing information and collaborating from one event to the other, which means our local event is a global event already. And there are people from around the world connected to it. And that means more and more people will be connected to Earth Regenerators and to Barichara, and all of us in those networks will be connected to these global networks. And this massive weaving process is that movement of the deep water in the North Atlantic I was talking about. There's something really big happening here. And so I want to just share with you this slide I created to explain what the ReFi Barichara event's going to be, just briefly. So those of you who might consider attending may decide you want to. And when I say ReFi practitioners, I mean anyone doing regenerative design. ReFi in a shorthand could say regenerative finance. You could say regenerative economics. You could say earth regeneration, but you know what I mean. It's all of that. And so the transformative experience has a key focus on visiting field sites. As all of you have seen when we show the earth regenerators who come here and they go visit places like the Bioparque in Oriente del Agua, Las Albercas, Agua Santa, and others. There's so many field sites that at the event we'll take people to field sites to visit them, to ground them in the real world context of what's happening here. That we will organize and host design immersions, some of which will happen before the event, some during the event, and some will continue after the event, around things like how to track value chains, create community currencies, do offers and needs to find the needs of local projects and contributors from the outside, which will include targeted fundraising and other really practical and impactful design processes. That we will invite people from the outside to feel the community process that is here. In 5 days, they won't be able to come to know it, but we at least want them to feel the presence of the amazing community of the people in Barichara. And then we want to create a meshwork of relationships between them. So during the 5 days, people are going to feel the weaving of going into the land, connecting into the community, and designing back and forth between them, always holding the idea of territorial process and the need for doing work in other landscapes around the world. And so the idea is we want to do regenerative design for 5 days, rooted in a real community and a real landscape, so that all the people in the ReFi world who are not rooted in real community and real landscape get a shock to their systems that they should stop wasting their damn time and start doing exclusively this kind of work. And they should reorganize the entire ReFi space in this way. And that's what we're trying to achieve for people who come to our event and then go to the DevCon event in Bogota the week later, is we want to change the mindset of people in the ReFi space with this transformative event to affect the ReFi space globally. And since more and more people are watching us around the world, we actually have the potential to do that, which is what Antonio had intuited at the beginning of the year. And the key thing is underneath all of this, quietly, we'll make this visible to the participants, that we're going to offer rituals and ceremony and indigenous perspectives. We have a wonderful group of people here that could host cacao ceremonies. I'm not talking about ayahuasca here. I'm not talking about intense personal spiritual journeys. I'm just talking about indigenous rituals of connection and cultivation of the sacred that will be shaped into the experience, because Barichara, as a place of rest, has a huge number of healers. And we have a network of local healer women. So if you want to think of it this way, this is a gathering place of witches. We've got some amazing pagan witches some beautiful, beautiful indigenous healers in Barichara that we're going to invite to create experiences for the participants as part of what we're doing. Because if we don't have the witches guiding us, if we don't have shamanic women leading us, we can't connect to the Mother Earth in the way that we need to. And so we're going to be designing that into this experience during the time that it happens. And those of us here, we all feel the presence of what these healers are doing. Even if we don't connect with them directly, it's absolutely amazing. So I just wanted you to see that. And I'm going to actually stop there and not go further in my slides because I think that's enough information for now. What I want you to feel is that there is a massive weaving process happening, a massive, massive weaving process. And we are in an acupuncture point of it. And the anchor, if you think of acupuncture, we have an acupuncture needle, which is the landscape of this place. And it's focused, just like how acupuncture works. If you do acupuncture on your foot, what does it do to help your lungs? Well, it helps your whole immune system to harmonize through electrical impulses to other parts of the body. So if you use that as a metaphor, we want to create an acupuncture healing pattern across the ReFi space to show them what happens when we take what everyone's talking about and touch the ground. And so I wanted to keep this opening more like conceptual and in flow to then invite conversation. And what might be nice is, since there are several people in Barichara right now that are on the call, I'd like to just invite anyone from Barichara who would like to share some of your experiences of what's happening, because I'm intentionally holding my part to leave room for your part. So if there's anything you'd like to share, like I know Kathy's doing some wonderful work with biogas digesters. Lilian is connecting into the healing community here in some very interesting ways. Jacob is doing some beautiful work with syntropic agroforestry, as well as other things. And so, and then Penny and Tyler could speak about whatever parts you'd like to talk about in this as well. Penny's taking on a lot of the sort of the project management for helping people arrive into the ReFi event with a lot of collaboration with Jacob. So there's like, we're all on a thread here. But I'd love to just invite any of you who'd like to share, including on the sidelines of me here, if you'd like to share something about what you see happening or your reaction to what I said. Either way, you might like to do it. Would anyone like to share? Jacob, please.
Yeah, the ReFi event preparations are definitely in full flow. One thing that I'm seeing quite interesting right now is that most of the engagement that we're getting is actually, I think, from people, at least for now, that are already closely affiliated with on-the-ground projects. So I think that that might be quite interesting to see how that continues to go, because it probably will, like if it keeps going like it has been until now, we'll probably get more of the people that really are mostly engaged in coding and not really on the ground. But for now, I found it quite interesting that actually a lot of the engagement comes from people first that are already on the ground projects, which kind of makes sense, because if that's the kind of event that you're organizing, that's the kind of people that you'll get. So that's been very interesting to see as I've been, doing or running the Twitter account a little bit and reading the messages in the chat that we have. So yeah, that's how it's going there. And then mostly right now I'm involved with the syntropic agroforestry work, which is really, really cool to see, because we had a second workshop a few weeks ago down here. And now you can really see how these two groups, depending on the location of the workshop site, have started creating their own little maintenance groups. So since it was very smart to plan the second workshop in a place that was already a community space with a huerta comunitaria, where already community action was coming in order to grow food together, now basically the people that used to do that huerta comunitaria work now also do the maintenance on a regular basis every Thursday morning of that new syntropic agroforestry site focused on mostly vegetables, plus some new people that have come in, which is really cool to see. And at the same time, now we've had the last basically field side visit with Paco, where we established new syntropic agroforestry systems for different use cases before Paco is going to his family in Cali and then Brazil for a while. which is really cool to see as well, because there has been basically this kind of Minga culture created around this, which is really cool to see, which is a traditional practice here where you basically say, okay, we small farmers don't have enough resources to work on our land by ourselves, so we're going to keep on rotating and helping each other out in order to, maintain our land. And the same thing is happening now with the syntropic agroforestry sites, where it's just so much easier if everybody comes in, learns something from Paco, and helps one of the community members of the syntropic agroforestry people that participated in the previous workshops out. And then in return, there's always a big feast with some tasty food, or at least a refrigerio, which is great and creates an awesome social culture where you learn together, you keep up to date, you kind of have this mutual support community of, we're all in this together and we'll learn with each other. So that's going really, really well. And it's really cool to see that kind of community spring up around that. That's it for me for now, I think.
So
thank you, Jacob. On
I
to Dan.
Hey, Jacob, thank you for that update. That was really great for adding on that. I just have a couple of questions, 2 items. And I don't see the papas on here, but they don't have to be. I wondered if you're designing anything that might include the children or whatever. You don't have to answer that directly. I just want to float that as you can put that in your back pocket if maybe you have a direct answer, and it is already part of the design. But I think that you've done some great work with the kids already, and I know that that's continuing. And I didn't hear any of that in the outline, and maybe I just didn't hear it, wasn't listening good enough, and maybe you said it. The other thing I have a question about, I think that Kathy's been the point person on the biodigesters in the region, and I think that she's going to be having to head back to take care of her dad. Would you be including, someone in her stead to direct or to help with the site visits to biodigester sites, if that's going to be part of the thing? I'm not saying it has to be, I'm just wondering. So just those 2 biodigesters and the children. Did you want to talk about that at all?
I'll just mention that the work with the children is continuing. It hasn't been a point of focus in what I've been doing in the last week, but it's continuing. And one of the elements of it that I think is really powerful is that there is now, because of Milena, the woman that is now in service to the community, helping weave the community, she's having conversations with different educators, with different educational groups. And so there's a patterning that's starting to occur there. But it's still in the sort of in the incubation stage, meaning that that'll probably be more structured and visible in October and November, meaning after this event. I personally don't have any thoughts yet about how this event would relate to the children, because that just seems really logistically challenging to find an appropriate way to connect outsiders who don't speak Spanish to something children are doing.
Yeah.
But that's something that I think will emerge as relevant or will remain sort of on the sidelines just as it all comes forth. Regarding the biodigesters, I would say the biodigesters, in the way I think about them, and Kathy, you can definitely chime in to add more flesh and roundedness to this. I tend to think of the biodigesters as being connected into the network of work with Mujer Vida, which is this network of 47 families that are doing a lot of local food production. And so, my umbrella for that in the last year has been the work of Margarita, is just the shorthand way I say it. But it's the weaving of families around changing the local food system, building a local market, creating processed foods from food waste, and lots of things connected to that. And the biogas digesters are integrating into the various elements of those webs of relationships. And so in my mind, I don't separate the biogas digesters from that larger integration, even though they are a very important point of focus. But that's just the way that I'm thinking about it at the moment. So Kathy, I don't know if you want to just jump in to respond to that directly before we go on to Victoria, because it'd be lovely to hear more from you about it.
Sure, great. Yeah, I'll just give a quick update of what's coming. And thank you, Jacob, for mentioning the Minga culture, because on Tuesday the 30th, we will be having a Minga at the location of Paul's granja and finca. And we'll just be having maybe 3 or 4, 5 people show up to help out with digging the trench into which the biogas digester will be installed. And the date for the workshop of installation will be probably about a day and a half of September 10 and 11. And so right now, my focus is to invite as many campesinos as possible, to encourage Paul to reach out to others in his area right there near Guane. And yeah, hopefully to bring in as many campesinos who have at least a couple of animals and a good potential for a biogas digester system. So there will be more, of course, after the installation. There will be a return visit from Lilian Rodriguez of the Red Biocol and UTA Foundation, who is going to be teaching the workshop. There will be a follow-up visit by her at some point in the future, maybe a month away. I myself will only be away for about a month, back to the US to give my brother a break in caring for our 104-year-old dad. And it may be the last time I'll see him alive. So yeah, that's, I just want to really give a shout out to Lilian Rodriguez, because she is such a powerhouse with biogas digesters. She's been personally responsible for the construction construction of 550 of them. She has 7 of them functioning on her own farm, which is Tosoli in Guapata. And yeah, she's going to help out with this whole project. And my hope is that we can also schedule a good time for her to go to visit some of the ones that aren't functioning real well, and help troubleshoot and make that happen. And a lot of this is thanks to Margarita, who has jumped right in wholeheartedly into this project. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. And just to mention, as an example of how the biogas digesters integrate into larger systems, there's a woman named Somara who has a 1 hectare piece of land with a biogas digester, with an agroforestry system for coffee and other plants, with pigs and chickens. And she also has food dehydrator and a distillery for making tinctures. And she does all of the cooking in her house with her biogas digester. So just to show how the systems can be integrated in really powerful ways. And you can imagine how these kinds of systems can be connected with syntropic agroforestry to accelerate soil production on some of these farms while they're growing their forests. So just to show that all the pieces do fit into beautiful integrated wholes, like holistic systems. And there are already a few great examples, Samara's being one of them. So what Kathy is talking about is a really strategic focus to connect another linkage in closing those cycles for the circular economies of the farms here. So it's really important work. Passing it on to Victoria.
Wow, this is really fabulous. I'm going to have to go and listen to some of the past ones, because this is the first one I've been on. Thank you. I have a couple of questions and some kind of observations. One is the conference going to be translated? Is it going to be online?
No, it's designed to be an immersive transformational experience. So doing an online version or even a translate version wouldn't work. And it's going to be in English because of the audience. So local people who attend will need to be those who can speak English. But it's also going to be a pulse of many things, including fundraising for projects in the community. So I think it's going to have lasting effects that are beneficial, but it's really designed with that immersive in-person focus.
Okay, so and then there's a resource that when you find things that need to be translated by a host of volunteers, I can probably connect our network with a network of volunteers who are always doing live translations from English to Spanish, Spanish to English through the Landmark network that Jonathan and I have been part of. And those people are incredibly generous. They get incredibly committed, and they will they will get the message out to the Colombians as well as the Americans that can do this kind of translation. And some of them are wealthy, and some of them are Colombians, and all kinds of things. So that's definitely possible. I'd love to do that. And that leads me to another thought, that I would love someone with a good marketing and communication sense to put together an email, because I'm not really on a lot of the other modes of communication. And the people I know, I don't know if they are, to share all of these things, because I am connected to people who would likely become members, would like to become donors, who would get the Yale University crowd. And I mean, if we want that, but I mean, there's so many people who want and need to hear this. And, the stuff that they're consuming is just so much of the colonized world in the sustainability marketplace, which is, just increasingly irrelevant. So that's one of the things I would really love. And then the last thing I want to say is, I loved it, Kathy, when you talked about what Liliane has done. I had no idea. And so I think what it's going to take, and it is for people who know the contributions of others to speak about their other people's contributions, because the people who are doing it are likely not to be the ones that are going to tell people about it. And it's meaningful for them. They don't need to have it shared, but it's so important for us to know who's in our network and to know how those connections are going to be made, because it's really trusted advisors in all of the communities we're connected with. Like, I know people who would be so interested in what's happening in Colombia around biodigesters that are doing the stuff here and have no concept of what's possible. So she's a trusted advisor in that community, and I would never have known that. I totally believe in the universe is wanting all of this to happen, and I'm learning about this stuff more and more. I'm so excited about it. And the last thing I wanted to share was that my husband, Jonathan, who is the guy who does all of the nonprofit 501c3 stuff for the United States for this group, has decided to do this as a volunteer, as a donation. And just, we both know that what goes around comes around. We have no concern about it being returned in whatever way in the universe. We're doing so much of our work that way anyway. It would be silly not to. So I really, really acknowledge you, Joe, for pushing the conversation to where it really wanted to go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. Is there anyone else who would like to share or has a question or a comment?
I think Jacob had his hand up.
Yeah, Jacob, did you have something you want to share, or did it move on?
Well, yeah, it's just that the conversation always moves on and it feels less relevant. Just saying that the last Minga we had for the Centropic Agroforestry team was at Angela Jimenez's reserve, who has a project with children where they come in and basically learn how to plant seeds, how to be connected with nature. And when I was up there, one of the main women that she works with for that approached me and was like, hey, can we do something with the Bioparque? And so Tyler and I have actually been clearing out a side space that would probably be optimal in order to start a little side system. And I'm going to meet with that woman that mostly runs that educational program with Angela Jimenez tomorrow afternoon and see how we can, while it is difficult to integrate children's education into a cryptocurrency event, it is a lot easier to integrate it into Centropic Agroforestry work. So we'll see if that works out as a short side note to what Dan asked earlier. Yes.
I'd love to just build on and amplify this point for a moment, because this is really important. One of the ways that we are very mindful and conscious in our thinking is intergenerational relationships. And this is something we don't have to use the phrase intergenerational or that word to show that how we're doing it. But like Angela Jimenez, who's a widow, who's probably around 70 years old, doing work with women, women who are the teachers, and actually men, because she brings in lots of different kinds of teachers, who are usually people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, who are working with children between the ages of 2 and like 15 or 16 years old. And so this intergenerational patterning is very prevalent here. And we're already starting to think about how, like we're envisioning the next 2 years of work for syntropic agroforestry. And one of our key focuses, which was designed into the event that Jacob was talking about earlier, the one in Alpino, is to train campesino youth to become leaders and future teachers. And when we do our fundraising, to find money to pay them to have it be their work for the next 2 years to maintain our community demonstration projects, while being trained by Paco, who's the expert in syntropic agroforestry. So these relationships across ages are really, really important. And we're already starting to think, how could we do our first syntropic agroforestry workshop with elementary school kids at one of the rural schools, which would take a little work for us to redesign how the course is structured. But we're already starting to think about those things. So the idea is, as we build our capacity, we're going to be weaving across ages and across parts of the territory, really, really mindfully. And so I just wanted to name that is part of the thinking as we move forward. Victoria, did you just leave your hand up, or did you have your hand up again? Just ask. Okay, I'll take your hand down for you just so it's not confusing. And then Mitty, please jump on in.
I'm just struck by your last comment, Joe, and Jacob's input. This whole issue of aging has come up on on a thread in the ER community on Mighty Networks, and I just can't say enough for the benefits, and I'm probably speaking to it as a 76-year-old. I can't speak enough to the benefits that I've seen and lived in Indigenous community of the elderly being spliced into whatever is needing to go on in the community. It's happened naturally in Indigenous community because everybody needs to play their part as long and as well as they can. But I'm so excited when I hear of any kind of processes that have us recognizing that retirement is a very modern concept that we could do well with hospicing. And the longer we cherish our elders and keep them active within the community, the less need we have for hospital facilities, memory care wards, those horrendous prisons that are a monument to the worst of Western modernity. So I'm just elated, just sitting here basking in the delight of listening to the emerging story. Thank you.
Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah.
Can I get an amen? All right, on to Claire, because
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
High fives. Claire, on to you.
Does that mean my speak?
Yeah,
Sorry.
we can hear you now.
Okay, good. So Joe, I know I asked a similar kind of question last time, but I'm gonna ask it again just because it's slightly different. How do you communicate to the wider community that's not as involved in the projects you're doing the context of the bioregion, so that these are all interconnected projects? Because, and I'll just tell you, the part of the backstory of like why I'm asking that question is, so often I see projects that start off with an interconnected focus sort of becoming more and more sort of isolated and their own fiefdoms. And how do you communicate, I guess, to the wider community that bioregional focus?
I want to tell you a story about my visa process, because it's exactly about this. So on Tuesday, no, it was on Monday. On Monday, I had to deal with this absolute headache of going to the Chamber of Commerce office to talk to the lawyer, to try and get something fixed that's been 2 months to get fixed, which was a clerical error in the first place, to finally get 2 words changed in a document so I could actually apply for my visa. It was horrendous, like pulling teeth in slow motion. And my accountant is named Luz. Luz is just the Spanish word for light. And she is like a light in the world. So Luz and I are waiting for our chance to talk to the lawyer to find out what kind of document my accountant needs to make for us to submit it correctly so it won't get rejected again, because they have to have the wording exactly right for us to make the change for the clerical error, which is why it took us 2 months to get those 2 words changed. And while we're waiting to talk with the lawyer, Luz is asking me a little bit about the work. And so, Luz is an accountant and she's just a normal woman. She's a mother. She's a campesino. She's from here. She lives in San Diego. And, so she doesn't do regenerative work. She just does accounting. And we're chatting. And I just started telling her, well, what we're doing is we're working on regenerating an entire territory. Oh, wait, I have my laptop with me, because I thought I might have to print out a document. So I pull out my laptop and I show her the picture I think a lot of you have seen of the relief map that's in white of the country of Colombia with the 3-dimensional relief of the mountains. And then I colored in this kind of salmon pink color, the bioregion that we're working in, the 500,000 hectares of land. And so I pull it out and I just start showing her. I said, this is the 500,000 hectares we're working on, and it's a climate system. And this is how the climate works. I'm like, and I'm saying things that she knows, like, the mountains to the west, it's raining there all the time and it's a cloud forest. But where we are, east of those mountains, it's really dry in the network of canyons. And she's from here, so she knows this. But there's this old campesino man that's like standing at the counter waiting to be helped at the Chamber of Commerce. And he stops what he's doing and he's leaning on his cane, and he's probably like 80 years old. And he leans over and he's listening like, what is this crazy guy with a weird accent in Spanish saying? As I'm talking about the climate system. And now it's like 90% deforested and it's becoming a desert and we have to reverse it. And that's how I do it. How I do it is I just point to the larger system and then I say common sense things. Common sense things like, well, being from here, there's a long dry season. Being from here, the plants in the canyon are desert plants, but over in those mountains in the west, it's a cloud forest. Or things like, you probably noticed there's a lot of migration of birds as they pass through the mountains. And so I don't have to be really technical. I just have to be really clear in my own mind what the territory is. And then just speak from that point of view. And I do this all the time. I mean, Penny can tell you stories of like, we go and get this caldo, this like, there's like goat shoulder stew that I think Benji would really like. And I get it for breakfast because it's like comfort food. And the woman Gladys is there. It's like a grandmother. And she's the kind of person that everyone wants her to be their mother. And we're just chatting and she's got a big goat farm and I'm talking to her and she's like, how's the reforestation work going in the bioparque? And I said, well, we're actually working in these different rural areas because we're trying to change the climate system. And so all I do is I just sort of casually mention it. I don't like lecture anyone. I don't tell them they have to think that way. I say, well, we're thinking about it this way. And she's like, wow. And that's all that it is. It's so easy to speak bioregionally because it's actually very human. It's just that most of us, being born into little cubules of city apartments and cubicle offices and stuff, that most of us don't know to think this way, but anyone who just goes out hiking in their landscape, just by hiking, they'll think this way. And so that's what I do. And the other piece, as Benji is really starting to name with the focus on the core teams and the landscape plans and the large scale stuff, I've known about those things for years. So I always think that way. I'm always saying things like, well, if you wanted to fund watershed restoration, you actually have to create a network of projects across the watershed. And you would have a hard time funding one of them, but you'd have an easy time funding 30 of them. And so it's just like that every time. And I think that's really key, is just thinking territorially and talking that way about the larger systems. I wanted to ask, because many of you don't know him, and I'll put you on the spot, Sev, if you don't mind. I wanted to ask you to share a little bit about the work that you do. And I want to do this for two motivations. One is I want you guys to know who Sev is, because he's really cool. And the other is that when we talk about groups like the Regen Network and people working in crypto, and it's easy to think it's all just Bitcoin and not really know what this space is. I would love, because Sev actually helps design the ecosystem, the market system, the marketplaces for ecosystem restoration. And so, Sev, I'd love if you could just take a moment to share a little bit about what you do, just so that we can start to see how clearly connected it all is to what we're talking about.
Yeah,
If you don't
absolutely.
mind.
Of course. Really quick, I'm curious where I might find that map that you mentioned of the bioregion.
I'll grab it for you right now.
Perfect. So I am coming from this space. I've been really deeply ingrained into the ReFi space for the last 7 or 8 months now, and I'm collaborating on a number of different projects, but have arrived at this conclusion and problem space around achieving ground truth. So in order to value these actions of regeneration, we need to be able to prove it, and in a way that's low cost, because the current kind of conventional systems are inefficient and too expensive for people to participate in.
Yeah, I use the example of being certified organic, for example, is really expensive.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of emergent tools that are able to be pieced together to be able to issue ecological assets at small scales and with a very low cost of verification. And that's really the space that I'm spend a lot of time thinking about and trying to problem solve in. And so there's a wide of a range of different projects around there, but looking at the tokenization of ecological assets, the ability to issue these on transparent, decentralized ledgers that where the information used to verify those things is also decentralized and transparent and accessible. And so, I mean, I can go on for a long time around in depth into all of these different pieces, but I'd love to anchor it around the event in Barichara and this idea of doing anchoring around syntropic agroforestry and looking at what are the opportunities for issuing and creating ecological assets when it comes to agroforestry. And so I think we can use that time and that space to, and you mentioned like design immersions. I'd love to really facilitate and organize around that piece of, being able to prove that these actions are happening and then compensate and value them, and where people who are doing this work on the ground can be properly valued and actually be incentivized, which I'm guessing is a lot of the work essentially volunteer at this point, or is there like funding around these syntropic agroforestry? Is it more so to do with the food production, or are there additional funds already?
Yeah, first, just the image that I mentioned, if you look at the link I included, there's a top image and then it's the next image down. So you'll find it in that article. Answering your question for syntropic agroforestry, we received a $20,000 donation from a private individual and Earth Regenerators to support 6 months of work to pay a core team. Okay. And that included paying the instructor, paying for 3 workshops, and the third one's not going to be until March because we're waiting until the rainy seasons. It would be scheduled to start again. With climate change, you can't actually predict when it's going to happen again. But so it's to pay the instructor and to pay a core team that is organizing the workshops, which is a huge amount of work, and have money to pay for all the plant materials, because we plant 7,000 or 8,000 plants in each workshop. So it's a lot of work to gather those things, and there's some expense involved. And we are, as we're raising money now, part of the raising money will be to allow that team to be supported, and not just for 6 months, but for an additional 2 years. And then also to support other people who can be hired to do maintenance work on the community. And so we're starting to build capacity for basically having all of that work be done as a commons. And then eventually get to the place where we can pay people subsidies, like basically subsidize their own land and their labor to reforest their own land. But that will be a little bit further along, and that's probably closer to some of the models that you would be designing for. But definitely what we're doing now is prototyping a space of creating various kinds of commons, including a core team of people that are supported whether or not there's income, so that they can just carry the work forward until the larger infrastructure is in place and there are enough people practicing that it'll eventually become self-sustaining.
Amazing. I think that what it takes, the financial incentive of what it actually takes to change behavior is what I'm really curious about, and want to, I think would love to dive in deeper when I'm there in Barichara, is like, yeah, what dollar amount does it take to change people's behavior from traditional degenerative practices to regenerative practices?
Yeah, I mean, my initial answer, because I have a partial one, is it's actually not about the money. There's a feeling of economic security, which the money is a proxy for. But a lot of it is actually, who are the neighbors that have good reputations? Like there's the woman with the really nice flower garden in front of her house. Everyone wishes they had a flower garden like hers. And so much of it is actually social status. With some financial needs that need to be met, but the primary motivations are not financial. And the financial needs are more significant when someone's in a financial crisis. When they don't have enough money to pay their bills is a different story. But because the local tourism economy is strong enough that those financial pressures are not the primary stress, although they are a stressor. And as you go from one area to another across the territory, it does vary because there are more impoverished places, and all of that complexity still exists. But it's very interesting how it all really works. Bennett, are you gonna play guitar for us? Oh man, dude.
Gotta get the practice in, gotta multitask. I know. I promise I'm giving you my attention still. Just
no, I was gonna say play us
the warm
a
up
tune.
going.
I was gonna say play us a tune. Come on. No pressure.
Maybe at the end if there's time. I don't want to intrude on the important work. So
no, whatever it takes to keep you in thought flow, keep rolling with it. You're gonna strum away. Are there any other questions right now or topics that people would like to cover while we're all here? Or maybe we're just still taking it in, which is fine. I mean,
just to dig a little bit deeper into the design immersions for during the event, is there an idea of what those spaces will look like? And I know I think there was some mention of like a community space they'll use. I just would like to have some, just curious about more of like the logistics of that.
Yeah, we haven't made any decisions about logistics. What we're doing is feeling into it. There's a space here called Casa de Cultura that has a large open courtyard. It looks kind of like this courtyard in my house, courtyard like this, except it's like 10 times bigger. And around the sides of that courtyard are about eight or 10 different rooms. One of those rooms is big enough to hold 100 people. And the other rooms are smaller. Several of them could each hold 50, which means we could actually use that as an event space for 100 or 200 people if we wanted to. So we might do some things there, but I actually think more powerful design spaces will be things like go sit under the trees in the bioparque and have a design charrette. And so, because we actually have the opportunity to immerse ourselves in the landscape as we do it. So I feel like we're gonna have a variety of opportunities for where we place things. And the questions I think are gonna be almost aesthetic, but not aesthetic to diminish it, but actually to elevate the importance of aesthetics. The aesthetic of designing while you're sitting in the forest, as you could imagine, is not just because it feels nice to be in the forest. It really does change your mindset to be in that kind of a space. And so what I suspect is going to happen is that there will be sort of official design events, meaning things that we put on the program. And then there'll be people that just do their little side things like, we decided not to participate on Wednesday, but 10 of us are going to go sit over here and have this other conversation. And what we as the hosts will want to do is just make it really visible what the options are of places they can go. Like, well, there's a really nice spot in the Beale Parquet and it's just like a 5-minute walk. Why don't you guys go over there? And so our host team will just be guiding people to where they would want to go. And I suspect it's going to be flexible in that way, even though we will give thought to the backbone of the event. I think we want the backbone to enable emergence. So, so I suspect it'll be a variety of locations. Like you could sit here in my courtyard with 10 people pretty easily. It's just not between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. because it's hot. We're in the tropics. But you could sit up there in the shade. So, you see what I'm saying? Like, I think that because it's a small town and everything's so close, that we can actually very easily divide ourselves out, just like in an open space sort of format, into 5 or 10 different locations if we chose. So logistically speaking, we just have a lot of flexibility and options. So I think what we'll do is create a really coherent narrative for how the whole thing's structured, create plenty of room for emergence, and have a couple of anchored design sessions that we know are really important. Like I think mapping how the local economy works and its value flows is an example of something that'll be really important. And I think really helping people understand what our territorial vision is and what the projects are in the territory. I think there'll be some things like that that we'll clearly want to do. And then there'll be other things that we'll make up as we go. And then in between will be some things that are partially programmed. And I mean, the kind of people that come to these kinds of things, like if we don't give them enough room to be creative, we'll be doing a disservice to the incredible things that people will do by just being creative themselves. But that's a great question. And we've got between now and the event to figure it out, which is still about 5 weeks away. So plenty of time. A lot of it also will be shaped by who comes and what they want to accomplish. So we'll keep shaping it as we learn more about who's coming. So are there other questions or comments that anyone has at the moment? If not, what might be nice to just share as a beginning of a closing is that where we're going with all of this. Where are we going with all of this? And I've been really sitting with in the last few days because my space has started to open up again with having so much time spent on the visa process for months and lots of stress with Las Albercas, which is becoming a lot more clear, and a few other things. Everyone in our family was sick off and on for about 3 weeks. So we had a lot of stuff that was taking up our mental space. And now that it's becoming more open and relaxed for me again, or relaxed is a comical word for the way I'm dancing with chaos at the moment. But I was reminded of something. I sent Benji a message about it this morning because I was laughing. Some of you may remember that when I was in Costa Rica in 2018 and 2019, I created a name for my project. I called it the Design Institute for Regenerating Earth. And then when we launched Earth Regenerators, and you can actually still see it in the description, where you go to About in Earth Regenerators, it'll say Earth Regenerators is a project of the Design Institute for Regenerating Earth, even though I never talk about the Design Institute for Regenerating Earth. And when I talked about creating an ecoversity here, I was like, oh, the Design Institute for Regenerating Earth will have a satellite office, and one of them will be in Barichara Ecoversity, but there can be other ones. And I had like lots of creative ways I thought about it, but I never really did anything with that idea, except that Earth Regenerators manifested it. And so what happened is the idea I had of a design school for regenerating the Earth has been born and is now almost 3 years old. It's Earth Regenerators. And the idea has always been to have a distributed network of human beings all over the planet who are collaboratively learning how to regenerate the entire planet bioregion by bioregion. And I just named this because what you can see happening around this event, around the territorial work for the Ecoversity and the Territorial Foundation, for the ways that we talk about the design processes and the things we're doing, everything that's happening in Earth Regenerators, we are actually birthing this decentralized unschool. It's a deschooling, unlearning, decolonizing, not a university, but has all, like, look at all the research and all the learning that we do in Earth Regenerators. It's like getting a PhD without all of the hubris and bullshit of universities. And it's happening for free as a decentralized network. Just means people can freely participate. You don't have to pay for a certificate or anything. And what we're creating now is the governance and financial systems for us to build real world economies. So we go from talking about this to manifesting it for real. And here in Barichara, I've been helping manifest one for real for 3 years with everything that came before it. And so I wanted to name it in this way to say that what is emerging is a planetary wide, I mean, it's not all of the planet yet, but it's many parts of the planet. A planetary wide network is emerging for creating landscape investment plans for each landscape, for building the tools and for prototyping and replicating them from one place to another, and for us to actually build that planetary network of bioregional learning centers. And so I think that as we move closer to this event in October, the importance of Barichara for the rest of the planet and for the rest of Earth Regenerators will just get more clear each step of the way. That it was never about one place, even though each place has to focus on itself as a place. And so what we're doing right now is building that capacity and freely giving all of it away. You know, after we hang up from this call, I'll upload the YouTube video of the recording. Everyone can learn with us as much as they want. And even though right now there are like 50 people who watch each of these videos, we will have documented the birth of a planetary network of bioregional learning centers. And people will look back 2-3 years from now, and they'll come back to learn what we were grappling with at different stages in the process. And we will be able to build curricula, not just one, but plural, curricula for how to create bioregional regeneration projects on the ground with net peer-to-peer learning from one bioregion to another. And so that's why using these coordination and communication tools from Web3 and crypto are so important. Just like using Zoom right now is so important. Using these communication tools to enable us to do this. And so just wanted to name that again to remind us of the context we're in. We're in the context where this planetary network must emerge because the collapse patterns are accelerating and are crossing more tipping points almost daily now. And we have to build enough of this that our decentralized network of bioregional experiments doesn't ever get to 0 participants. With the collapse patterns that are coming, many of them will fail. We need to be sure that at least one of them doesn't. And so we can't focus only on one. We have to focus on many at the same time. But what we're doing here in Barichara is role modeling how to do it in an open, collaborative, and accessible way. Even though it's in English and there are various things about accessibility that we need to get beyond as we do this really well, we're doing it as well as we can within the constraints we have. And so I just want to name that because it would be so easy to really see the complexity of Barichara and say, wow, that's amazing. That's what I should do. And it's like, maybe it is for you. But what we really need to do is do this in 100 places or 500 places, 500 bioregions around the world at the same time. And so that's why it's so important that in this event, we create a planetary network of collaboration. And Earth Regenerators already being a planetary network is well on its way to that. But we just need to get better and better at doing that. And so I just want to name that to say that holding the complexity of one bioregion and learning how to hold that complexity is how we will do it in other places. To say, wow, we never oversimplified it. We never made it just about agroforestry or just about the kids. We made it multi-theme, we made it multi-actor. We did it at a scale that made sense. A 500,000 hectare landscape makes sense. And so we have to do this in many places. So I just wanted to name that and say that's why I lean into the complexity and I don't shy away. And that's why I don't mind it being confusing and overwhelming at times. Actually, it must be. We have to get good at being overwhelmed and being confused because the complexities are real. So that's all I wanted to say. And to say thank you all for being here. You're all invited to come to the event, October 3rd through 7th. So find your way here if you feel called. You're all invited to help us with the raising of $500,000 for this experiment to continue in the next 2 years. And you're invited to find your way into whichever parts of this make sense. You've seen the names and faces of people. If you want to talk about biogas digesters, talk to Kathy. If you want to get involved in the centropic agroforestry work or other pieces that Jacob's mentioned, reach out to Jacob. If you're interested in what Sev's doing, you can talk to Sev and we can organize and arrange ways for us to collaborate to share what people like him are doing. Because there are a lot of really smart people doing really creative things, but we don't know about each other. And so finding each other is the key to it all. And we're doing it. This event is gathering so many people who hadn't talked yet. That's way more important than what the 5-day event in Barichara could possibly be. And so just naming that. And so thank you for being a part of it today and in the past and in the future. And onward we go. So we can stop now and thank you, everyone. And get involved in whatever way you feel, however you feel called.